Julie, just to begin with you, as you join us from Texas, far away from Washington, and yet I'm sure a lot of people are there asking questions about what exactly is going on in this House of Representatives. It doesn't really seem like the Republican conference, at least at this moment, is capable of uniting around one person.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't seem that way. I mean, you have one representative essentially saying, a Republican, that this is like an episode of Veep that turned into the House of Cards. I mean, that is not where you want to be when there is a war going on in Israel. Aid is needed. There are questions about aid for Ukraine. So at this point, it appears they are no closer. You even have Mike Rogers basically saying, we're going to need Democratic votes. Nothing that I ever thought would happen this week. So they have a long way to go and a lot of work to be done.
Well, that's for sure. Let's hear from the Democratic leader in the House. Hakeem Jeffries spoke today about what he thinks his colleagues need to do here.
House Republicans need to end the GOP civil war now. What is the problem? House Democrats have continued to make clear that we are ready, willing, and able to find a bipartisan path forward. But we need traditional Republicans to break from the extremists and partner with us for the good of the American people.
Julie, no one could have predicted the events of this week, just like we couldn't have predicted the events of last week. And we can't tell anyone what's going to happen next week. But it is starting to seem like it might involve Democrats. Is that how this ends?
It could possibly involve Democrats. But, Joe, you know what that means? That's basically everybody completely splitting from the Freedom Caucus. Because right now, you know, there have always been these attempts to appease the Freedom Caucus. I mean, that really was what undid Kevin McCarthy. So if that happens, they finally said, we've had enough, we're splitting with you, and we're going to go to the Democrats. The question is, what do the Democrats want? They're not going to just say, OK, we're on board here. They're going to have to figure out what they want. There's going to be a lot of closed doors about this. And this will basically show that the Republican Party just simply could not do it by itself.
Well, and if they can't do it and struggle to get a speaker, Nick, that means it's going to be a struggle to get any aid through Congress for Israel or otherwise. We know that there are steps the administration is taking on its own. Where is the limit of that?
Well, it's a great question because the administration wants to send munitions. They want to send aid, humanitarian aid. They have a laundry list of things they want to send to Israel. And that is not something they can do. They are preparing a supplemental. We know this from having spoken with folks at the White House. That supplemental is on its way early next week, and they are going to want an answer very, very quickly. I mean, the Hamas war could turn into a ground invasion by Israel within days, and you can bet the administration is going to want to have that supplemental in its back pocket by the time that starts.
Let's zero in on that for a moment. I'm sure we have more to say about this speaker's race and the dysfunction in Washington. But do we have any sense of timeline here? There's obviously the matter of hostages in Gaza. Will there be more time allowed to get them out of Gaza before tanks or troops roll in?
Well, that is really the question on everyone's mind right now. But the indications so far from Israel, I mean, very, very tough remarks from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu last night. Yeah. And other officials basically saying we are now at war. Every Israeli is a soldier now. And by all accounts, given that the tanks and troops are massing on the border with the Gaza Strip, it looks like they will be prepared to move in without securing the release of those hostages, though U.S. officials and Israeli officials are obviously working on that very hard right now.
And of course, all the hostages and just all of the other human stories of everyone who has fallen victim to this conflict have been plastered all over televisions, all over the world. Frankly, Julie, you just can't escape from it at this point. And I wonder how knowing some of the atrocities that are happening and the horrendous images we are seeing reflects back on a House of Representatives that just can't seem to get itself together. Should we expect that is going to amplify the political pressure on the individuals in that chamber?
I mean, I would expect that it would. However, we've been seeing this and we've been hearing about this. I mean, part of it is the Senate is not in this week. So I think that maybe they feel like they have a little more wiggle room because they'll need both to act. But, the bottom line is there is so much going on in the world. There is so much devastation. There is going to continue to be pressure on the House of Representatives, the Republicans who are in the majority, to get this done so that they can help. And the longer this goes on, this becomes a bigger problem for them and a major problem as these nations need aid.
We heard from Secretary of State Blinken today in Tel Aviv, to your point, Nick, a pretty important visit for the Secretary of State, who was looking and sounding rather presidential. Let's hear what he said about a widening itinerary for his travels.
From here, I'll go on to Jordan, where I'll meet with His Majesty King Abdullah and with Palestinian Authority President Abbas. And then over the coming days, we'll visit with leaders in Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, and Qatar. Across each of these engagements, we'll continue pressing countries to help prevent the conflict from spreading and to use their leverage with Hamas to immediately and unconditionally release the hostages.
He's the face of the administration, obviously, in the region right now, but we're also hearing from administration officials in Washington about this money, the $6 billion that had been, I guess, unfrozen. Now it looks like being refrozen as part of the Iranian prisoner swap. Republicans on Capitol Hill have been making a lot of noise about this. Where does it stand?
Well, I mean, the U.S., the Biden administration has said Iran is not going to get a cent of that money. I mean, this just feels like a different era. This was September, less than a month ago. The administration is trying to de-escalate tensions with Iran, and as part of a prisoner swap, they say, okay, Iran, you can have this $6 billion to spend on humanitarian goods and medicine. And now, I mean, just the political cost of allowing any money to go to Iran, given their alleged involvement, possibly knowledge of, but certainly longtime support for Hamas, makes that just utterly impossible for the administration. So likely to expect that Iran's not going to see a cent of that money.